across the community, organized for quick browsing. Use it to spot patterns, pull links, and build your own research list. qnotables.com. Browse the notables, verify the facts, stay informed. All reports can be found on Q Research or qnotables.com. Notables do not equal endorsements. We are researchers who deal in open source information, reasoned argument, and dank memes. We do battle in the sphere of ideas and ideas only. We neither need nor condone the use of force in our work here.
From the Q Research Boards. January 7, 2026. Former Austin ISD elementary teacher pleads guilty to child sexual abuse material charge. Federal prosecutors say a former Austin ISD elementary teacher pleaded guilty to possessing child sexual abuse material. Court filings describe a large volume of images found on devices seized during the investigation, including material investigators said was computer-generated. Sentencing has not yet been announced, and the defendant faces significant federal prison exposure under the charge. TD Bank insider pleads guilty to facilitating money laundering. The Justice Department says Wilfredo Aquino, a former New York-based TD Bank employee, pleaded guilty to facilitating a money laundering network that moved hundreds of millions of dollars through bank accounts. Prosecutors allege he helped evade reporting requirements and processed bulk cash activity tied to the scheme. The case is part of a broader federal push targeting financial gatekeepers who enable illicit cash movement. 9 Salinas Acosta Plaza Norteño gang members indicted in racketeering case. Federal prosecutors in Northern California say 9 alleged members and associates of the Salinas Acosta Plaza gang were indicted for racketeering conspiracy. Authorities describe the indictment as an extension of an earlier crackdown and say it targets violence, intimidation, and organized criminal activity linked to the group. The defendants are expected to face arraignments and pretrial proceedings in federal court. China reportedly orders major banks to disclose lending exposure to Venezuela. Reuters reports China's financial regulator has urged major banks and policy lenders to disclose their exposure to Venezuela and tighten monitoring of Venezuela-related credit risk. The move follows heightened instability after U.S. actions involving Venezuela's leadership and rising concern about financial shock and geopolitical spillover. Beijing has publicly condemned U.S. actions, while also signaling internal risk management steps to protect Chinese financial institutions. CIA highlights Artifact of the Week: lithium iodine battery used in pacemaker technology. The CIA posted a feature on lithium iodine battery technology, describing how research later shared with the medical community helped support long-life batteries used in heart pacemakers. The agency's public-facing Artifact posts highlight declassified or historical technology with broader downstream use. The post is informational and not tied to any current intelligence operation. Iran protests enter 10th day with large demonstrations in Tehran and Elam. Reporting from multiple outlets says protests in Iran continued into a 10th day, including large gatherings and clashes reported in Tehran and Elam province. Coverage cites arrests and casualties, with human rights tracking groups claiming the numbers are rising as security forces respond. Iranian officials have blamed foreign interference, while demonstrators cite economic pressure and political grievances. Senate confirms Josh Simmons as CIA General Counsel. The CIA and official congressional tracking show the U.S. Senate confirmed Joshua Simmons to serve as CIA General Counsel. Agency leadership publicly welcomed him following the vote. The role oversees legal guidance for intelligence operations, compliance, and oversight coordination as the administration advances its national security agenda. Nordic countries push back on U.S. Greenland rhetoric as Arctic tensions rise. A maritime industry outlet reports that Nordic governments issued a coordinated pushback against renewed U.S. rhetoric about Greenland, emphasizing Danish and Greenlandic sovereignty. The dispute is playing out against a backdrop of Arctic security competition and NATO politics. European leaders are warning that destabilizing sovereignty questions could trigger wider alliance strain. Federal prosecutor warns more arrests coming in California Homeless Services fraud probe. A federal prosecutor says more arrests are expected after investigators followed the money in what's being described as a major fraud case tied to homeless services funding in California. Authorities say the investigation is tracking how public funds were billed, routed, and spent, with additional targets under review. The case is part of a broader enforcement wave focused on large public program fraud. Michael Reagan, son of President Ronald Reagan, dies at 80. The Associated Press reports Michael Reagan, the eldest son of President Ronald Reagan and a longtime conservative commentator, died at age 80. The Reagan Foundation announced his death and noted his role in promoting his father's legacy. No cause of death was released in the initial announcements. UK and France signal troop deployment plans for Ukraine if peace deal reached. Multiple outlets report the UK and France signed a declaration of intent to deploy forces into Ukraine after a peace deal, framed as a security guarantee and stabilization mission. Leaders emphasized this would be contingent on an agreed settlement and structured to deter renewed aggression. Russia has opposed any NATO-linked military presence, and details remain subject to negotiation. U.S. Pacific Fleet highlights surface warfare training. The U.S. Pacific Fleet released imagery showing surface warfare crews conducting live training focused on lethality and readiness. The Navy says the drills are designed to prepare sailors for high-end maritime conflict and to maintain deterrence in the Indo-Pacific amid rising regional tensions. Protest held outside Gresham, Oregon City Council meeting. Demonstrators gathered outside a Gresham, Oregon City Council meeting, drawing a visible police presence as protesters raised concerns over local governance and public safety issues. City officials acknowledged the protest while proceeding with the scheduled meeting. No major incidents were reported. Senator Mark Kelly clashes with Defense Secretary over censure threat. Senator Mark Kelly publicly lashed out at Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, using profanity and saying he may confront him directly over a proposed censure. The exchange highlights growing tensions between the Pentagon and Senate Democrats as defense policy and accountability debates intensify. SAVE Act push gains momentum in Congress. Lawmakers renewed calls to pass the SAVE Act. Legislation supporters say would strengthen voter eligibility verification and election integrity. Backers argue the bill closes loopholes and restores confidence in federal elections. The measure remains a flashpoint on Capitol Hill. Iran condemns foreign interference as street protests continue. Iran's government accused foreign intelligence services of interference as protests continued in multiple cities. State media reported arrests and warned demonstrators against further unrest, while footage circulating online showed crowds chanting anti-government slogans. Tensions remain high as the standoff continues. Naval Institute calls for aggressor squadrons to improve combat training. The U.S. Naval Institute published analysis arguing for dedicated aggressor squadrons to better train forces against adversary tactics. The piece says realistic Red Force training would improve readiness as potential conflicts grow more complex and technologically advanced. Congressional Democrats hold January 6 anniversary vigil. Congressional Democrats staged a candlelight vigil marking the anniversary of January 6, focusing on law enforcement officers and institutional security. The event drew criticism from Republicans, who accused Democrats of selective outrage and ignoring other political violence across the country. UK and France signal willingness to deploy troops to Ukraine after peace deal. British and French officials said they are prepared to deploy forces to Ukraine if a negotiated peace deal is reached, framing the move as a security guarantee. Leaders stressed any deployment would depend on conditions on the ground and international agreement. Moscow has strongly opposed the idea. China and Russia reaffirm financial and diplomatic ties with Venezuela. Venezuelan officials confirmed new diplomatic engagements with China, Russia, and Iran, following leadership changes in Caracas. The meetings signal continued alignment among U.S. adversaries as global reactions to Venezuela's situation continue to unfold. Federal authorities expand fraud investigations beyond Minnesota. Federal officials signaled that fraud investigations underway in Minnesota are expanding into other states, including California, New York, and Illinois. Prosecutors say the scale of suspected misuse of public funds is significant, with more arrests and indictments expected as cases develop.
At shop.isitwaya.com, everything you buy supports akun.top, the place where people talk freely no matter what. Check out our Akun Honey Pot, a jar of yummy honey that's as strong as your voice. Put it on toast or in tea. It's not just honey, it's freedom in every bite. Then there's Akun Butter, a smooth handmade skin cream that makes you feel good while you fight for what's right. Awesome wood and pieces for display only. Hang them up or set them out. They're for showing off Akun's tough spirit. Want to help even more? Get a proto membership. So go to shop.isitwaya.com now and grab some goodies. Help akun.top keep free speech alive, and let's keep the ideas flowing loud and free.
All reports can be found on Q Research or qnotables.com. Notables do not equal endorsements. We are researchers who deal in open source information, reasoned argument, and dank memes. We do battle in the sphere of ideas and ideas only. We neither need nor condone the use of force in our work here. From the Q Research Boards, 6 January 2026. Caracas orders police crackdown on anyone accused of backing the U.S. operation. Venezuela's government has issued a decree ordering national police to locate and arrest anyone accused of participating in or supporting the U.S. action that removed Nicolás Maduro. The order signals a hard internal security turn, with officials treating political support for the U.S. operation as collaboration. Rights groups warn the decree could be used for broad reprisals as Caracas tries to reassert control. Sanctioned tankers depart Venezuela as U.S. blockade enforcement faces. Dark mode evasion. Shipping data, cited by major outlets, says multiple tankers loaded with Venezuelan crude have sailed despite the U.S. blockade, with some vessels operating in dark mode by limiting or disabling tracking signals. Reports also say some ships departed without standard registration or safety documentation, raising insurance and port access risks. The departures highlight how difficult it can be to enforce oil restrictions at sea when fleets are willing to take legal and safety shortcuts. Silver hovers near $80 an ounce as precious metals stay volatile. Silver trading has remained near the 80 per ounce level after a major run-up last year, with daily price swings driven by global risk sentiment, currency moves, and industrial demand expectations. Analysts say the key questions now are whether tight supply and investor demand can sustain high prices, or whether volatility pulls silver back from recent highs. Report raises security questions after China-linked figure tied to golf courses near U.S. Nuclear Command Hub. A new investigative report claims a China-linked individual connected to intelligence work owns 2 golf courses located near Barksdale Air Force Base in Louisiana, which supports major U.S. strategic forces missions. The reporting argues the proximity raises counterintelligence and surveillance concerns, especially amid broader scrutiny of foreign-linked land ownership near sensitive sites. U.S. officials have not publicly detailed any specific threat tied to the properties. Debate reignites over claims. mRNA COVID shots could speed up cancer. A wave of posts is pushing the claim that mRNA COVID-19 vaccines can accelerate cancer progression. The strongest peer-reviewed evidence in major journals does not show that effect, and some recent research has even explored whether vaccination may improve responses to certain cancer immunotherapy regimens. Doctors say cancer patients should make vaccine decisions with their oncologist based on individual risk and current clinical guidance. Florida officials say immigration crackdown surpasses 10,000 arrests. Florida officials say state immigration enforcement operations have led to more than 10,000 arrests, with the state working alongside federal partners to transfer detainees into immigration processing. The DeSantis administration is framing the effort as a model for aggressive enforcement, while critics warn about civil liberties and community impacts. The number and pace of arrests make it one of the largest state-level enforcement surges in the country. Reports track increased U.S. special operations-linked air movements into Europe. Open-source flight tracking and defense reporting point to a surge of U.S. military aircraft movements into the UK and onward into Europe, including assets associated with special operations support. Analysts caution that aircraft movements alone don't confirm a specific mission, but the timing is drawing attention after Venezuela-related operations and ongoing tensions tied to tanker enforcement and regional security. Report claims Capitol police officer who shot Ashley Babbitt tied to unaccredited home daycare. New reporting circulating online says records show U.S. Capitol Police. Captain Michael Byrd and his wife have operated a home-based daycare in Maryland that is described as unaccredited. The claims have driven renewed scrutiny and political debate, but officials have not released new formal findings tied to the daycare allegation. The Justice Department previously said it would not pursue criminal charges related to the shooting. Viktor Orban declares, "End of the liberal world order," promotes era of nations. Hungary's Prime Minister Viktor Orban used a major New Year press conference to argue that the liberal world order ended in 2025 and that 2026 begins what he called an era of nations. Orban framed Hungary as an early advocate of that shift and positioned his government's strategy around sovereignty, border control, and national policy independence from Brussels. Protests spread across U.S. over Venezuela. Action with competing messages in the streets. Demonstrations across multiple U.S. cities have erupted in response to the Venezuela operation, with crowds divided between celebrating Maduro's capture and condemning the intervention. Some rallies revived older anti-war slogans like "No Blood for Oil," while other groups organized explicitly pro-Maduro events. The competing protests underline how polarized public reaction remains as the legal case moves forward in New York. Number Musk floats. Estimate that fraud could equal around 10% of federal spending. Elon Musk posted that his rough estimate for nationwide fraud could be around 10% of the federal budget, a figure he framed as hundreds of billions of dollars per year. Budget and oversight experts note that fraud, waste, and abuse are often mixed together in public debate, and that hard totals depend on definitions and verified casework. Even so, the statement is fueling fresh calls for audits and enforcement. Azra Nomani. Spotlighting protest network funding in new Fox News reporting. Fox News published new reporting by Azra Nomani examining how protest networks mobilized quickly after the Venezuela operation, including questions about funding streams and organizational coordination. The reporting argues some activist groups operate as rapid response political infrastructure. Organizers dispute parts of that framing, but the broader question of nonprofit funding and protest logistics is now back in the spotlight. Gunfire reported. Near Venezuela's presidential palace in Caracas, reports out of Caracas say Venezuelan security forces opened heavy fire near the Miraflores presidential palace after drones were seen near government buildings. Multiple outlets say the situation was later described as under control, with early indications pointing to a security overreaction rather than a confirmed attack. U.S. officials have said the United States was not involved in the drone incident. Mexico downplays U.S. intervention talk after Trump threats. Mexico's president publicly rejected the idea of U.S. military action in Mexico, even as President Trump renewed aggressive rhetoric after the Venezuela operation. Mexican officials emphasized sovereignty and said security cooperation is one thing, but military intervention is not acceptable. Analysts cited by major outlets say an invasion remains unlikely, but the rhetoric is raising regional tensions. Dark mode. Tankers reportedly leaving Venezuela. Despite U.S. oil blockade, shipping and energy reporting says a number of oil tankers have departed Venezuela in recent days, even with U.S. enforcement pressure, with some vessels operating in dark mode by disabling tracking signals. Sources familiar with shipping documentation told reporters that at least several large tankers were cleared to depart under those conditions. The reports underscore the ongoing challenge of enforcing oil restrictions at sea. HHS official points to Somali UN ambassador linked to U.S. Home Health Agency. Cited in fraud case, Deputy HHS Secretary Jim O'Neill posted that Somalia's UN ambassador, Abukar Dahir Osman, is associated with Progressive Healthcare Services, a Cincinnati home health agency that HHS says was previously subject to action tied to a Medicaid fraud conviction. The ambassador has not publicly responded in the coverage reviewed. The claim is fueling fresh debate as multiple fraud investigations draw national attention. Report: 2,000 federal agents deploying to Minneapolis for immigration push and fraud probe. CBS News reports the Trump administration is sending roughly 2,000 federal agents to Minneapolis as part of an escalated immigration enforcement push tied to fraud investigations. The report says multiple agencies will be involved, with a focus on enforcement operations and investigative support. Minnesota officials and advocates are bracing for a major on-the-ground surge in the coming days. Hilton and Minnesota Hotel apologize after ice room cancellations. A Hampton Inn in Lakeville, Minnesota, operating under the Hilton brand, apologized after canceling reservations tied to federal immigration officers. DHS accused Hilton of obstructing enforcement, while Hilton said the property is independently owned and the action does not reflect company policy. The hotel's operator also apologized and said it would work to accommodate affected guests. Trump says Ukraine did not target Putin's residence with drones. President Trump said U.S. officials do not believe Ukraine targeted a residence belonging to Russia's Vladimir Putin in an alleged drone incident, walking back earlier reactions based on limited initial information. Reuters and the AP reported that Ukraine and EU officials disputed Russia's claim, and U.S. intelligence found no evidence of a targeted strike. The dispute is now being watched for its impact on ongoing peace discussions. Israeli aid groups face funding headwinds and rising hostility abroad. Reporting from Israeli and international outlets says some Israeli aid groups are struggling to raise funds overseas and facing increased rejection tied to political polarization and anti-Semitism. The coverage describes donors and partner organizations becoming more cautious, with some groups reporting operational friction in multiple countries. Observers say it adds pressure on humanitarian capacity at a time of continuing regional instability. CPB votes to dissolve. After federal funding cut, the Corporation for Public Broadcasting voted to dissolve, ending its decades-long role distributing federal support tied to public media stations. The AP reports the decision followed congressional defunding and internal planning to wind down rather than remain as a hollow entity. Public broadcasters will continue independently, but the move reshapes how many local stations sustain operations going forward. Switzerland orders immediate asset freeze on Maduro and associates. Switzerland's Federal Council announced it is freezing any assets held in Switzerland by Nicolas Maduro and people associated with him, effective immediately. Swiss authorities said the goal is to prevent any outflow during the current situation, and that if future legal proceedings show the assets were illicitly acquired, Switzerland will work to ensure they benefit the Venezuelan people. Swiss officials did not confirm whether assets exist or provide figures. Trump-linked posts reignite debate over children's health guidance. A series of Trump-linked posts about children's health, covering Tylenol use and vaccine scheduling, sparked immediate national debate online. Major medical guidance for medication use and vaccines is typically issued through established public health processes, and clinicians urge families to rely on their pediatrician and official health agencies for individualized decisions. The story is moving fast, and the practical impact will depend on what federal health authorities formally publish and implement. U.S. Labor Department posts Our American Heritage message. The U.S. Department of Labor posted a message highlighting American heritage, describing it as built by pioneers, rugged individualists, warriors, and innovators. The post framed that theme as a guiding spirit for the agency's work and was widely shared by pro-administration accounts. Dan Scavino highlights the Washington Monument in new post. Dan Scavino posted imagery of the Washington Monument in a late-night social media update, drawing attention from supporters and prompting a wave of reposts. The post itself did not announce policy, but it quickly became part of the day's broader online political messaging cycle. Mexico rejects intervention talk after Venezuela. Operation: Mexico's president again rejected any notion of U.S. military intervention in Mexico, following fresh debate after the U.S. operation in Venezuela. Mexico's government emphasized sovereignty and said security cooperation is one thing, but foreign military action is not acceptable. Analysts say rhetoric may continue, but direct intervention remains unlikely.
Every voice matters. The power of free speech is more important than ever. Imagine a place where you can share your thoughts freely, explore new ideas, and engage in meaningful conversations anonymously. With online anonymity, you can express yourself without fear of judgment. It's about freedom, creativity, and connection. Join the conversation that matters. Embrace your voice. Celebrate your freedom. Visit 8kun.top today. That's 8kun.top.
That's all for now. Stay alert, stay informed, and never hand your thinking over to anyone on a screen, including me. God bless you, God bless our troops, and God bless the United States of America. See you soon.
We have it all. All of the illicit wealth in the world has been tracked by the National Security Agency for the past 15 years. We now know beyond a shadow of a doubt that Wall Street has stolen $100 trillion from Main Street with naked short selling. We also know that Wall Street has laundered $100 trillion in dirty money from trafficking in children and women and drugs and guns and gold. I could never tire of saying that 90% of the people in the U.S. government, the U.S. military, the U.S. intelligence community are good people trapped in a bad system. The secret intelligence community serves the deep state. It does not serve the American public. And CIA in particular has been doing torture, rendition and torture, drone assassination, regime change, helping to start wars based on lies, all because war and trafficking in humans and drugs and so forth are a profit center for Wall Street and the deep state. And once the president gets Benny into NSA and processes 100% of what we have at NSA, we have every single one of you by the balls. You cannot survive this. You have one out. The Truth and Reconciliation out is make the deal, motherfucker, or you are going to die.